There comes a moment when you realize something uncomfortable. Your emotions have been making decisions for you. You call it instinct. You call it passion. You call it being honest with yourself. But sometimes it's just anger wearing confidence, fear pretending to be logic, hurt disguising itself as pride. And the most dangerous version of you isn't the one who gets louder when they're angry. It's the one who can feel everything and still choose what to do next. Because when someone can provoke you and you refuse to react, they lose access to your behavior. When disappointment hits you and you don't collapse, it loses its power. When jealousy whispers that you need to prove yourself and you simply keep moving, you become harder to distract. You stop making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. That's when everything changes. You don't become cold. You become controlled. You don't stop caring. You stop allowing what you feel in one moment to decide who you become in the next. Most people are easy to predict because their emotions hold the steering wheel. Insult them, they react. Ignore them, they chase. Hurt them, they seek revenge. Praise them, they become attached. But imagine becoming someone who can sit with anger without obeying it. Sit with fear without surrendering to it. Sit with loneliness without begging someone to stay. That kind of control doesn't announce itself. It stays quiet. And while everyone else is reacting to what they feel, you're watching your own mind, choosing your response, and refusing to hand your power to a feeling that was never meant to control your life. Your emotions are loud. They arrive without permission, demand your attention, and often convince you that whatever you feel right now must be acted on immediately. Anger says, say it. Fear says, run. Jealousy says, prove yourself. Hurt says, make them hurt too. Anxiety says, do something before it gets worse. And if you have spent your entire life obeying every emotion that enters your mind, you may mistake reaction for control. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Feeling something does not mean you have to obey it. Anger can tell you that something crossed a boundary. It does not get to decide how you respond. Fear can warn you about danger. It does not automatically get to decide what you avoid. Sadness can tell you that something mattered. It does not mean you have to destroy everything around you because you are hurting. Jealousy can expose insecurity. It does not mean you need to compete with everyone who makes you feel small. Your emotions are information. They are signals, but signals are not commands. Think about how easily people can lose control when their emotions become stronger than their judgment. Someone sends a disrespectful message, and suddenly they type 3 paragraphs they will regret tomorrow. Someone walks away, and suddenly they chase. Someone succeeds, and suddenly they feel threatened. Someone criticizes them, and suddenly they spend the entire night trying to prove that person wrong. One moment controls the next, and that is how people become prisoners of reactions they never questioned. You do not become powerful by eliminating emotions. That is impossible. You become powerful by creating space between what you feel and what you do. That space is where your power lives. You feel the anger rising, but you wait. You feel the urge to respond, but you breathe. You feel the need to explain yourself, but you ask whether an explanation is even necessary. You feel rejected, but instead of begging for validation, you observe what the rejection is teaching you. That pause might look like weakness to someone addicted to immediate reactions. It isn't. It is discipline. Anyone can explode. Anyone can send the message. Anyone can slam the door. Anyone can say something cruel when they are hurt. Anyone can make a decision at the peak of emotion. But it takes another level of awareness to feel the fire inside you and still decide where the fire belongs. You begin to understand that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every insult deserves an answer. Not every misunderstanding deserves a defense. Not every person deserves access to your emotional world. And this is where your behavior starts changing. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" You start asking, "What choice serves the person I am becoming?" That question can save you from years of unnecessary regret. Because emotions are temporary visitors. They can be intense in 1 hour and almost irrelevant the next morning. Yet people often make permanent decisions during temporary storms. They quit because they are frustrated. They leave because they are angry. They attack because they are embarrassed. They give up because they are disappointed. Then later, when the emotion disappears, they are left standing beside a decision that their calmer mind would never have made. You don't need to become emotionless. You need to become conscious. When anger appears, study it. When fear appears, listen to it. When jealousy appears, question it. When sadness appears, allow yourself to feel it without turning it into an identity. You can acknowledge an emotion without becoming that emotion. You can say, "I am angry," without becoming an angry person. You can say, "I am afraid," without allowing fear to define your future. You can say, "I am hurt," without turning your pain into revenge. That distinction changes everything. The strongest person in the room is not always the person with the loudest voice. Sometimes it is the person who has every reason to react, but chooses not to surrender control. They see the provocation. They feel the pressure. They understand the temptation. And they still choose their move carefully because they know once emotion takes the steering wheel, judgment becomes a passenger. Most people think they are making decisions when they are actually reacting. Something happens, an emotion rises, and before they even understand what they are feeling, their body has already moved, their mouth has already spoken, their hands have already typed the message, and the damage has already been done. That is the trap. Reaction feels powerful because it is immediate. It gives you the illusion that you are taking control. Someone disrespects you, so you answer harder. Someone ignores you, so you ignore them back. Someone makes you jealous, so you try to make them jealous. Someone hurts you, so your mind starts searching for the perfect way to hurt them back. For a few seconds, it feels satisfying. Then reality arrives. You realize you allowed someone else's behavior to decide yours. Think about that. A stranger can say one sentence and control your mood for the next 6 hours. Someone can leave you on read, and suddenly your mind creates 10 different stories. Someone can criticize your work, and suddenly you start questioning everything you've built. Why give another person that much control? The moment you react without thinking, you hand them the remote control to your emotions. And the person who controls your reaction doesn't necessarily need to control your life. They only need to know which button to press. That is why emotional discipline begins with one simple decision: pause, not forever, just long enough to separate the event from your response. Someone insults you. Pause. Someone disappoints you. Pause. Someone provokes you. Pause. Someone suddenly walks away. Pause. That tiny moment can change the entire direction of your life because it gives your mind a chance to enter the conversation before your emotion takes over. You don't have to answer immediately. You don't have to explain yourself immediately. You don't have to defend your character to everyone who questions it. Sometimes the most intelligent response is the one you choose after the emotion has stopped screaming. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean allowing people to disrespect you. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means choosing your response instead of allowing your response to choose you. There is a difference between weakness and restraint. Weakness says, I can't do anything. Restraint says, I could react, but I'm deciding whether reacting serves me. That is a completely different mindset. When you start practicing this, you notice something strange. The situations that once controlled you begin losing their power. The message that used to ruin your night becomes something you can read without immediately responding. The criticism that used to trigger insecurity becomes information you can examine. The person who used to provoke you realizes that you are no longer giving them the reaction they expected. And suddenly, the game changes. Not because you manipulated anyone, not because you became cruel, because you stopped participating in the cycle. You begin choosing your words carefully. You begin choosing your battles carefully. You begin choosing who deserves an explanation and who deserves silence. You begin understanding that every reaction costs something. Your attention, your energy, your peace, your time. And once you understand that, you stop spending those things carelessly. You realize that anger can make you say something that takes months to repair. Pride can make you walk away from something valuable. Fear can make you reject an opportunity before it even begins. Impulse can make you destroy what patience could have protected. So before you react, ask yourself one question. What happens if I do exactly what I feel like doing right now? Sometimes that question will expose the truth. Maybe you want to send that message because you want them to feel your pain. Maybe you want to quit because you are exhausted. Maybe you want revenge because you feel powerless. Maybe you want to prove yourself because someone's opinion touched an insecurity you never admitted existed. And once you see the real reason, you gain something more valuable than a reaction. You gain choice. You can still speak. You can still walk away. You can still set boundaries. You can still fight for yourself. But now you are doing it from a place of awareness instead of emotional chaos. That is when your presence begins to change. People may still test you. Life may still disappoint you. You may still get angry. You may still get hurt. But the difference is that your emotions no longer have automatic authority over your behavior. Anger wants noise. It wants movement. It wants a reaction so immediate that you don't even have time to question whether the reaction belongs to you. It tells you to speak louder, expose everything, send the message, make your point, prove that you cannot be disrespected. And in that moment, silence can feel almost impossible because your mind is demanding everything you're feeling. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do when you're angry is nothing, not because you are afraid, because you are weak, and to understand that anger is a terrible strategist. Anger sees one moment and turns it into entages, into an full moment and into an entire story. Someone says something disrespectful, and suddenly your mind remembers every insult you've ever received from them. Someone disappoints you, and suddenly every good thing they ever did becomes meaningless. One betrayal becomes proof that nobody can be trusted. One mistake becomes a reason to destroy the entire relationship. That is what uncontrolled anger does. It takes one spark and tries to convince you that the whole world is burning, and if you speak while you're inside that fire, you may say things that your calmer mind would never choose. That's why silence can become power. Silence gives your emotions nowhere to perform. When you refuse to immediately react, you force yourself to sit with the feeling instead of throwing it at someone else. You feel the anger. You acknowledge it. Is a different kind of strength that most people believe control means never getting angry. No, control means being angry and thinking. You can feel your blood boiling and still choose your words. You can feel disrespected and still become feasted and still respectful. You can feel disrespectful. You can still refuse yourself for the punishment. You can be tried and someone else person. You can walk away with their last moment. That's one idea should do validity. Without one more bonus and with your pain. That's not true. Where is that work? Either like for someone in front you start noticing things you couldn't see while arguing. You notice patterns. You notice intentions. You notice whether someone actually wants to solve the problem or simply wants to keep you emotional. You notice it to improve the situation or simply feed it. That's why you should never confuse silence with surrender. Silence can be a boundary. Silence can be patience, and silence can be observation. Silence be the decision to protect your peace instead of proving your point. You don't have to accusation. I don't have to grab every accusation time. You don't have to understanding. Like I said, then I'm going to more for the corner to go in. Is going to the old everyone have you saying that you may like them. I do what I want. I hate it. Finish for next month. I'm in one of the swing. Going to smoke. Bring up what on if you to rescind you. Something inside you becomes quieter. You stop explaining every move. You stop defending every decision. You stop turning your life into a courtroom where everyone gets to judge your choices. And when anger tries to pull you back into that courtroom, you learn to sit there silently and watch it pass, because emotions rise and emotions fall. What feels unbearable at 10 p.m. can feel completely different at 10 a.m. So geek before your angry mind makes a decision. Wait before sending the message. Breathe before answering. Walk away before escalating. Sleep before deciding. Think before confronting. Not because the other person can injure you, because you deserve protection from the version of yourself that appears you are not has complete breathing and getting emotional to love. You learn to stay silent in the moment, and when you are your next stage, you'll go in and believe soon. The moment when you realize to step before the moment that any spiritual something like reward you begin discovering a kind of control that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply waits, watches, thinks, and chooses its next move when the emotion has stopped shouting. Pain has a strange way of making the present feel permanent. When you're hurting, your mind doesn't say, "This is difficult right now." It says, "This will always be like this." It takes one painful moment and stretches it across your entire future. A rejection becomes me. A betrayal becomes, nobody can ever be trusted. I'm not capable. A goodbye becomes, I'll always be alone. And that is where it can make it, because pain can convince you weak. Because pain can convince you to make decisions that your calmer mind will ever make. You can be exhausted and decide to cut through something you once loathed and when made. You can be heartbroken and decide that you will never trust anyone again. You can be angry and destroy a relationship that could have been repaired. You can convince yourself that trying again is pointless. One moment, one emotion, one decision, and suddenly something temporary has created a permanent consequence. That's why you have to learn the difference from feeling pain and making decisions. From pain, you are allowed to feel cry. The motor road, you are allowed to admit that something broke down around the after the moment. It is not the entire story. When something hurts, like there's decent, the loads and pain, something really. Don't rush to make a life. Changing decision just because you desperately want the pain to stop. Sometimes the decision that feeding an escape from discomfort, you don't need to leave everything. Because you're having a terrible week, you don't need to destroy every connection because one person disappointed you. Don't need to abandon your goals because progress became difficult. You don't need to become emotionally numb because carrying once hurt. Give yourself time. Doesn't yourself time. Time goes every numb. Give yourself time. But it changes the way you see things. When you're inside the storm, everything looks urgent. Every thought feels important. Every emotion feels like evidence. Every fear feels like a prediction. Then the storm passes, and suddenly you realize you were reacting to a moment. That is why powerful decisions are rarely made at the peak of emotional chaos. Let the anger cool. Let the sadness breathe. Let your nervous system come down from the edge. Then look at the situation again. Ask yourself what remains true after the emotion becomes quieter. Maybe the relationship really with play lead is unhealthy. With clarity. Emotion with clarity. Not rage, maybe the opportunity really isn't right for you. Then walk away because you've thought it through. As maybe someone genuinely betrayed your trust, then establish your boundary without turning your pain into revenge. And maybe you made a mistake, then learn from it without sentencing yourself to a lifetime of failure. There's a difference between making a decision because something is wrong and making a decision because you are hurting wrong. It comes from awareness. Yes, it comes from awareness. You don't have to believe every thought that appears. When you're hurt in your mind will create stories. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, it will tell you that you're not a one that lost everything, that there is nothing left to hear, but emotional thought is not automatically. You can hear without you can come in. You can come in through the painful season into their women emotion. This is where real emotional string with being emotion is this serious whenever permanent emotionally the season where real emotional type of asking, how do I make this feeling disappear? And you start asking? That question changes the way you handle pain. You become patient with yourself. You stop demanding immediate answers. You stop making dramatic promises during emotional storms. You give yourself permission to heal before deciding what your next chapter of the person. Because sometimes there's no way to come after pain and discover whether than the person you only fed and can finally discover everything alone what might recognize gone. You when they it's trauma to show you what's over the kind of reasons well may lose time but don't destroy tomorrow to punish today. Don't let one terrible moment write the rules for your entire life. Feel what you feel. Step back, breathe. They wait, they observe. And when the emotion becomes quiet enough for your mind to speak clearly, then decide what deserves to stay, what needs to change, and what you are finally ready to release. People don't always control you by force. Sometimes they control you by discovering what makes you react. They learn which words make you angry, which situations make you jealous, which silence makes you anxious, which criticism makes you defensive, and which kind of attention makes you desperate for approval. Then they don't need to control your entire life. They only need to press the right button. And if you react every time, your behavior becomes predictable. That's why emotional control is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming difficult to control through your emotions. Imagine someone knows exactly how to make you angry. They say something disrespectful, and immediately you start explaining yourself. They criticize you, and you spend an hour proving them wrong. They ignore you, and you chase their attention. They suddenly become distant, and you start questioning what you did wrong. They aren't necessarily controlling you because they are powerful. You are giving their behavior power because they have learned how easily they can move your emotions. The moment you understand that, you start looking at your reactions differently. You begin asking yourself, why did that work on me? Not, how can I get revenge? Not, how can I hurt them back? But that question is uncomfortable and useful because sometimes the person provoking you isn't the real problem. The real problem is the button they discovered inside you. Maybe it's your fear of respected. Maybe it's your need to be understood. Maybe it's your insecurity about being replaced. Maybe it's your desire to prove that you're underestimated you. Who better to wonder someone that someone some value when it is yeah. Whatever it is. Once you understand it, you can stop allowing other people to operate it. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless. You still feel angst. You still feel jealousy. You still feel the feeling. But now there is a gap between the feeling and the action. But a gap makes you harder to manipulate. Someone tries to provoke you. Someone tries to provoke you, and you don't immediately give them the reaction they expected. Someone tries to guilt you, and you examine the situation instead of automatically apologizing. Someone tries to make you jealous, and you refuse to compete for attention. Someone questions your worth. Changes the emotion if it induces you change the action of the dependent. You stop at evaluating other people's behavior to determine how you feel about yourself, and that's when certain people become confused because they were expecting the over-earned version that I explained to that. Too much to the darkness, and especially disapproval, or you heard the blue us that lead to chase approval and argue over every misunderstanding apparent of your result, extending yourself. Do something. Don't know. Do anything. You think you may go to 10 or 8 You start syncs your boundaries. You notice who only behaves well when they are getting what they want. You notice who creates unnecessary drama and waits for you to react. You notice who apologizes and changes. You notice who apologizes and repeats the same behavior. You notice who inwardly cares and who simply enjoys having emotional access to you. Enjoys having an emotional access suddenly. Suddenly, your emotions become something you can study instead of something other people can exploit. That's a serious shift. Because when your mood depends entirely on how someone treats you, they have influence over your internal world. But when you can maintain your center regardless of their behavior, that influence becomes smaller. Someone can dislike you. You remain grounded. Someone can misunderstand you. You remain grounded. Someone can leave you grieve. But you don't destroy yourself. Someone can criticize you. You listen, evaluate, and someone can provoke you. You decide whether the response is even worth your energy. That's what control looks like, not silence for the sake of appearing powerful. Not pretending you don't care, another playing psychological games. Just refusing to let another person's behavior dictate your next move. The less reactive you become. The less reactive you become. The more clearly you think, and the more clearly you think, the harder it becomes for someone to push you into decisions that serve them instead of you. Your emotions still speak. You simply stop giving them automatic authority. And when you stop giving every person access to your emotional switches, they can still knock on the door. They can still speak. They can still try to provoke you, but they no longer get to decide what happens inside you. There is a version of you that reacts to everything, and there is another version of you that watches. The first version feels an emotion and immediately obeys it. The second version feels the same emotion, but asks a different question. What should I do with this? That question changes everything, because emotions are powerful, but they were never designed to run your entire life. They can warn you, motivate you, protect you, and reveal what matters to you. But when emotions become the leader, your decisions become unstable. One day you feel unstoppable. The next day you feel one day you want to trace something. The next more complete. One moment you trust someone completely. The next moment you're ready to cut them off forever. If your decisions keep changing with every emotional wave, you never build a stable life. You become a prisoner of the moment. But when your mind takes the lead, you stop asking what feels good right now and start asking what is right for your future. That doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means listening without surrendering. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel fear and still continue working. You can feel and your will, jealous, and still feel blind. You're still your own. People go to carry your emotion. They say that then feeling motivated people destroy. It just then feel motivated and being yourself move for emails, from we say. So they don't tomorrow, they don't feel like it either. Then another week passes, another month passes. Eventually they look at the distance between where they are and where they want it to be and blame circumstances. But sometimes the problem wasn't a lack of ability. It was allowing feel instructions. You will not always feel motivated. You will not always feel ready for the emotional state before it takes in. You will not always fight. You'll feel feel action. You may spend your entire life waiting. Your mind has to be capable of saying, I don't feel like it, but I'm doing it anyway. That sentence contains a different kind of power. It means your goals have more authority than your temporary mood. The same principle applies to relationships. You may feel the urge to chase someone who is pulling away, but your mind can ask, is chasing creating connection, or am I abandoning my own dignity because I am afraid of losing them? You may feel the urge to respond to an insult, but your mind can ask, will this response improve my life, or will it simply create another problem? You may feel the urge to quit after failure, but your mind can ask, did I actually fail, or did I simply encounter information I needed to improve? These questions create distance between emotion and decision, and distance creates clarity. When you become emotionally disciplined, because the other thing to expect feeling because feeling doesn't get redirect your path. You still experience bad days. You still have days of falling and twice. Total moments when you're confident. This will be moments where love, super statements, we'll just be able to say about one of those. Well, okay, do go work. Have it that. But if you want to tell elements, no, have the authority to define your future. And it's not defined by if you found days, not by life for your mistakes, all the values, not the work, critical rejection, and later everything else. Feeling like living on so motivated. I go my skill. I can just have to look at my way. And we work in the way by which I make all the chill around the quite only simple comparing to the way Let awareness hold the steering wheel. Because your feelings belong to the present moment, your decisions build the future. And when you finally understand that difference, You stop sacrificing tomorrow just because today feels uncomfortable. You stop allowing temporary moods to rewrite permanent goals, and you begin moving through life with a mind that can hear every emotion without becoming controlled by any of them.